Hello and welcome to the EPRI Current. I'm your host for today's episode, Samantha Gilman, and we'll be talking about a relatively new concept and niche concept called agrivoltaics. It's yet another example of how the energy industry can work with and co-locate with other industries. So without giving up too much, I want to introduce our guests for today and let them introduce themselves. So first off, we have Terry Jennings, who is the team leader for the environmental aspects of wind and solar here at EPRI. And he is joined by Bailie Neary, who's a researcher in our Energy Systems and Climate Analysis group. Thanks to both of you for joining me today. And Bailie, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you do at EPRI?
Hi, thanks, Samantha. Yep, I'm Bailie. I work on EPRI's Environmental and Climate Analysis group. And I also work closely with the Strategic Insights group, who produced the original report that we're going to be discussing today, looking at agrivoltaics and AI through the technology innovation section of EPRI.
Great. And Terry, a little bit about you and what you do at EPRI.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Samantha. Yeah, manage the environmental aspects of solar and wind programs, as you mentioned. And those programs really are geared towards addressing environmental issues associated with the deployment, development, operations, and end-of-life management of large-scale solar and wind projects.
Excellent. So I mentioned before that we're going to be talking about agrivoltaics, and I'm going to guess for a lot of our listeners out there, they are not familiar with what that is. Also, agrivoltaics is quite a word. It took me a while to learn how to say it, I will admit. But to sort of ground our listeners and give them some background into what we're talking about today, Terry, to kick this off, why don't you give us a short overview of exactly what agrivoltaics is?
Sure. I think the definition's evolving slightly, but in general, it's the co-location of agricultural applications with solar development, and that can include crops, livestock grazing, other environmentally beneficial uses at those sites like pollinator habitat and native vegetation.
And so you said it's co-located with solar, and that's how I've always understood it. But I'm just curious, can it also be co-located with wind?
It can, and I would say it generally is. I think it's a different footprint than solar. Or wind is different from solar, obviously. Solar having a much larger footprint, wind having a smaller footprint. So oftentimes at some of the large-scale wind farms you see, it is still continued active agricultural usage.
And so what types of crops can be raised in this area? Are we also talking livestock? What sort of, agriculture and farming are we looking at for agrivoltaic projects?
It varies, and it's a fairly complicated question.
Whoops.
I would say, with the current state of solar and the types of developments, it tends to be more specialty crops, stuff that maybe gets planted and harvested more by hand, so a little more challenging to do so. But there's also a lot of interest around large-scale agricultural crops like traditional wheat, corn, et cetera, that you might be able to grow and harvest around solar, but that requires a change in the design of those systems to accommodate that.
So I'm going to guess that one of the factors taken into account when choosing what sort of crop to co-locate on a solar farm would be how much shade. As you know, the point of the solar array is to soak in the sun. And also we know lots of plants and animals need the sun. So what sort of actual crops are we looking at on these co-location? I'm thinking my own knowledge was like coffee is something that is typically shaded. What other crops do we see at these co-located agrivoltaic projects?
I'm going to kick that question over to Bailie because I know she has maybe some direct experience with crop types.
So like a lot of things, it's super site specific. So what works well in, say, Arizona might not work well in an agrivoltaic installation in Maine. So there is a large agrivoltaic research site in Arizona, and one of the specialty crops they've been able to develop there is a specialty pepper called the chiltepine. And it does it does well under the shade. So it benefits from the shade, actually. There's also been installations in Europe where you have the solar panels installed almost on purpose to shade the grapes for wine production, where, again, the grapes are benefiting from the increased shade from the panels. So there's a multitude of different crops being explored, but it's all very regional and very site-specific.
Now, Bailie, you work in our Energy Systems and Climate Analysis group, which is a lot of modeling and that sort of work. So how did you get started and involved with agrivoltaics?
I got started in agrivoltaics actually as a project in grad school, where the university had entered into a contract with the local utility where they were going to lease some of their agricultural research sites to the utility. The utility would install solar panels, but the university maintained access to run research projects on that plot. So specifically designed to be an agrivoltaic research site. So my group focused more on the researching like literature review for the economics and the energy production side of that research. But another group of grad students in the horticultural department created a whole planting plan. And then there were a myriad of different researchers that had project proposals for the site that would be developed. So really showed me just how diverse the applications and desire to conduct agrivoltaic research is.
So given the diverse applications for agrivoltaics, Terry, why don't we see more of these projects?
I think the short answer is really cost. And there are challenges with a utility scale solar plant, for example. It's a large scale electricity generation facility. And I think there are some challenges around operating a facility while also trying to farm around that. If your farmers need to be educated, aware, and capable of operating farming equipment and applications around that equipment. And then on the other side, similarly, if you're a large scale solar facility owner operator, you're going to have some concerns about other activities that might be taking place on that site with the potential to damage the equipment or cause any health and safety considerations.
So we've had a colleague of yours, Jessica Fox, on the podcast a couple of times actually now, talking about EPRI's pollinator work and the pollinator power party. Most notably, we've talked about the Rancho Seco project in Sacramento, California with SMUD. And that project is not quite like what we've been talking about, but it's similar in they've been bringing native plants back to promote pollinator species and habitat. They have sheep on site to graze that native plant. I believe they even have a farmer who is on site frequently to help take care of the sheep. And I'm curious, how do other species and native plants and projects like that tie into agrivoltaics? And I'm gonna turn to Terry for this one.
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question too, I would say. I think it really depends on the site and the goals of the site and regional considerations. I think the Rancho Seco project, I think it's in a more arid climate and really focusing on beneficial use of that land as well that provides what is also commonly called ecosystem services. So rather than ecovoltaics. So rather than agrivoltaics, ecovoltaics really kind of is intended to provide ecosystem services or benefits to the environment. So improved soil health, improved vegetation health, that sort of thing, without a direct agricultural component per se. Sheep grazing, for example, is, I would say that historically has been considered an agrivoltaic application, but I think is more, as the industry evolves, is starting to be called an ecovoltaic application. It is a way to undertake vegetation management without mowers or other traditional methods. And it also, that process also provides some ecosystem services or environmental benefits to the site.
So slightly switching to a topic that's received a lot of attention, especially in the past year, is AI. There's talk about AI with everything. And it's not just powering AI, which EPRI's done a lot of work on. We had a study come out last year out of the Technology Innovation Group that Bailie mentioned before, estimating how much power will be needed to power all these data centers, to power AI in the future, but also how to use AI part of the energy industry. And we hear how to use AI for everything, how to help your day-to-day life with AI. And I'm going to guess agrivoltaics is no different. And I believe that this is the paper that Bailie was mentioning before. So Bailie, how do we see how AI could be incorporated into agrivoltaics in the future?
Yeah, so it's still a bit of an open question. There have not been so many examples that we can point to, live, case studies of AI and agrivoltaics. But in theory, I think the applications could go everything from siting to ongoing operations. So if you can imagine, siting can be difficult, especially like Terry said, there's so many different constraints when you're looking at an agrivoltaic site that are a little bit different than a traditional PV installation. So let's say you could gather data on, what kinds of crops are normally farmed in that area, availability of land, favorable terrain, solar irradiance, and, social acceptance for solar installations. And, the AI algorithm could pop out a few different locations where the site might have a better chance of going forward. There have also been suggestions amongst people in the industry looking at using AI for panel orientation, optimizing solar production, maybe creating something with a digital twin to predict crop output, or using machine learning to anticipate both crop and solar yield. So I also see a potential application as a lifetime response to some of the sensor data that are present on a lot of the current agrivoltaic sites. So most of the current agrivoltaic sites are also research sites. So they have moisture sensors and temperature sensors and irradiance sensors, and then just full of all of these sensors. So you can imagine, say, that soil moisture sensor under the panel indicates that the moisture is too high to be optimal for the crop trying to be grown. It could automatically trigger a shift in the panel so that it would tilt to allow more sun down to the ground to evaporate some of that moisture.
So I know this is in your area of expertise, but you mentioned something, and I was hoping you could just give our listeners a quick definition of what it is. We've heard it on other episodes, but just real quick, what is a digital twin?
So my limited understanding of a digital twin is that basically you set up experiments to collect how that environment would operate, and you model it so you can predict using that real live experience data to what would happen in the future. So alongside, right, these site-specific characteristics, you would collect data on that very specific site and then create something in the computer that models those exact conditions. So you could look 3 years out and see what the model says is going to be favorable for that location. So basically trying to evaluate very specific considerations before it actually happens.
In a recent EPRI Journal article, Bailie, you were quoted saying agrivoltaics and AI makes sense because it's a complex optimization problem. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Let's start by thinking about like a typical PV installation is still a fairly complex optimization problem given whatever that site is trying to optimize. So let's say that the site is optimizing solar production. The operators want to maximize the amount of solar energy created on that site. So given the constraints of the location and the climate and regulation and market conditions, you can create, it's a math problem, given that data, to come up with how to best operate the site to reach the goal of the most solar production. So that's already complicated. Now we're adding a layer of saying, now we want to co-optimize somehow, whether it's maximum solar production and maximum crop production, maximum solar production given X amount of crop production or grazing production. And so it adds a whole nother layer of data to the math problem. And so AI is really good at parsing those large amounts of data. So that's why I do see AI being a good candidate to help agrivoltaics kind of take off.
That's great. So I think this has been a really good introduction to agrivoltaics and how AI can be incorporated, seems, into anything these days, including agrivoltaics, which is still such a new idea. I want to give you both, though, an opportunity to share anything with our listeners that we might have left out, anything that they should take with them from this episode. So, Terry, I'm going to turn it over to you first. Any final thoughts to leave with our listeners?
I think there is a lot of potential for agrivoltaics to help. There's a challenge in the industry right now with deploying enough renewable energy, whether it's wind or solar. There's a lot of competition for land, and there needs to be. I shouldn't say there needs to be. There could be an opportunity to offset that conflict by this co-location of agriculture with large-scale renewable energy development. And I think I mentioned the challenges earlier. The biggest challenge was cost, and the cost comes from everything. It's designing a PV system to meet the intended agrivoltaic application cost effectively. And the industry in the U.S., it's focused on low-cost, large-scale renewable energy development. And so I think that's the challenge with incorporating a secondary application at a similar cost. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for more research, both on the technical side from a crop production standpoint, but also through policy and costing methodology that might help reduce the cost associated with agrivoltaics. So reducing that conflict of land between agriculture and renewable energy development, providing benefits on both ends of the spectrum.
Great. And Bailie, anything you want to leave with our listeners?
I mean, I completely agree with Terry. I think, agrivoltaics is a really great example of technology at the food, energy, water nexus. And if you are someone that's interested in topics on how we collaborate to create solutions to the problems coming down the pipe in a rapidly warming world, this is maybe one example of something that you could turn to learn about how these systems are evolving.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you both taking the time to speak with me and our listeners here on the EPRI Current. And with that, I'm your host, Samantha Gilman, and we will talk to you next time.
If you like today's show, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast. And feel free to share the podcast with your colleagues and friends. For more information about EPRI, please visit our website at www.epri.com. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter at EPRI News. Together, we are shaping the future of energy.